profile, and it has these bus bars, basically, with huge terminal bolts on them. They're actually a 3/8 bolt, and you know, I've never really liked those little hex head terminals on the Kilovax.
Oh, on the Kilovax, yes.
Again, the more terminal you have here, the more, well, I guess you would say heat dissipation you can do. And I like to hook up big terminals, lots of things to them. Those little screws never really worked for me. In fact, in the original Speedster, I put a copper plate on them.
Right,
on two
copper plate.
And ran them in parallel. I'm doing something a little different here. We're running 2 gigavacs in series. And what I've done is connected them, the terminals, with a piece of copper bar. This is just, it's a 20 millimeter by 10 millimeter stock, 4 inches long. I mounted the 2 gigavacs to a aluminum enclosure I got on eBay for $29, I think, from one of the Asian guys that sells these things. Screwed it into what's actually the lid of the thing, so they're hanging upside down. Cut a couple holes, put some grommets, and made me some cables. This one's a foot long. It's going to go to the controller. This is about 3 feet. We're going to go to the batteries with it. And so our pack voltage would come in here, go through this gigavac, through the copper bar, and out this gigavac, and out to the controller. And that's going to be our control. Now recall I said that we wanted to send 10, we wanted to send pack voltage through a relay that was fired by the ignition.
Yes.
So I've cut another little hole, put another little grommet, made some wires, and the green wire is going to go to 12 volt switched ignition, and that goes to this relay, which is a normal 12 volt 30 amp relay with spade connectors on it. And so we just tap off our incoming pack voltage to that relay and use this to switch it out. The ground side of the relay is actually grounded to the case, which we will have to make sure is grounded, but it's our 12 volt system, and that's going to switch out pack voltage on this orange wire. Orange is actually the color you're supposed to use for high voltage in vehicles, and because emergency people, fire, police, are trained to recognize that as indicating high voltage in a vehicle. So I used an orange wire. We'll probably put an inline fuse on this. I think the diagram calls for 10 amps. And so when we switch 12 volts in, it'll close this, apply our pack voltage, in this case about 120 volts, we'll hook this into the connector on the controller, and that's how it will do the pre-charge. Then it's going to, we're going to hook these 2 wires, the black and red. This is the coils of our gigavacs.
Gigavacs, right.
And I actually have those wired in series. By taking 2 12-volt coils and putting them in series, that gives us essentially the equivalent of a 24-volt coil. The controller will see that as a 24-volt coil, which it likes better, and we wind up with 2 contactors in series. I recently read that in Australia they have dropped the requirement for an in-the-cabin shutoff.
Oh, for a cutoff.
Which we may or may not have in the Speedster Part D, if you use 2 contactors in series.
All right.
Now,
that makes sense.
The theory is if one of them welds together, then the other one would still break, and because they can't, they're never going to break at exactly the same time, and so one of them will work and break the current. If you have 2, that's a safety backup, and so that's their thinking on that. And I thought it was very good thinking.
I think it's nice.
Since I need a 24-volt coil, why don't I just take two 12s, and that gives me the added safety. These are small enough, and I put it all in a nice little enclosure like this. And I think this system will work very well for the Curtis 1238 controller. But it got me thinking, you know, these contactors are supposed to be able to break up to 2,500 amps once.
One time, yeah.
And several hundred amps multiple times. I had not used this before. It is smaller.
Quite a bit.
And this is a pretty big deal in the safety of your car. Of course, we're using 2. And it's rated for 350 amps. We're going to be doing 550 in theory as a maximum. That's kind of within the upper limit of the spec on the GigaVac, but it brings up a lot of questions. And I like questions, and that's why I hang out in the garage where my whiskey is and all my tools to measure.
All the test equipment.
So what I did was took this in, and I was doing some testing. I've been playing with the lithium cells, and I'm going to do a segment on that. I don't know if we'll get it in this week or next week, but it's kind of interesting. I've got some good news about these batteries.
Good.
And I've got enough high current load now that kind of in a parallel system that I can do 300 amps on a, 4 or 5 cells. And so we're going to do some 3C testing. And while I was playing with my test setup, I put this in there, put a little switch on the 24 volt thing, use a 24 volt supply, and just a little toggle switch. I can switch them on and off and test my box. Well, why not test the batteries? So I hook up this end of the load, this end of the batteries, and I can actually switch on 300 amps into the load, and while it's running at 300 amps, switch it off.
Break it and see what you get.
That's not so much a theory, that's breaking 300
amps. Right.
And by doing it about 200 times, I kind of proved to myself that I can do 300 amp pulse testing to simulate a driving cycle, and I'm pretty well set up to do that now, and we're going to do it. I've also checked these 2 relays 200 times, breaking 300 amps, not at rest, but actually breaking a 300 amp flow. So I either have a thoroughly tested contactor box for Speedster Part Dub, or I have one that's about worn out.
About one, yeah, that's right. We won't have much left.
I can't really take it apart to look at the terminals and examine them, although we may do that at some point. But so that's where we're at on this. I've got a little, the bottom actually, it fits over this, and then we'll mount this in the Speedster, and this is how we'll apply our battery voltage to
That's
the controller. Nice. And it'll be switched by the ignition, but the controller will actually be taking care of the pre-charge and switching in the pack voltage. So I think it's a pretty neat solution. I'm kind of proud of it.
I think so.
But it's got me playing with batteries, and along the way I tested it. I have to tell you, I'm pretty impressed with the GigaVac relay. And we may be at $141 a piece using those somewhat more often. A little pricey. Nice. I get some stuff on eBay for $55, but my big one's about about $150.
KiloVac,
and that we're using in the Mini. But I think this is a little safer system. It has a little heavier terminals, big 3/8" bolts that I can put terminals on. And in using 2 of them, I think it'll be a little safer system, and it'll last a little longer, I hope. So that's what we're doing with the contactor box.
I like it.
Speedster Part Dub.
I like it.
One of the things in just briefly test driving the car, and we were kind of cheating, our Tim's 600 controller needs water cooling.
It needs all that we can give it. Yeah.
And we drove it around just a couple times around the block. It got hot.
Yeah. Yeah, we couldn't go too far. We were throwing axles out.
Well, that's right, true. But the controller still got to be
didn't help.
The motor really didn't,
no.
But the controller did.
Yep.
And so I've asked Breen here to break out we have boxes of Summit racing equipment AN fittings.
We've got a lot.
And we're actually doing a cooling system, which we showed you the Messier pump.
The Messier pump.
When we put the lower thing on. Brain has been doing some filming of hose creation and how you use these fittings with hoses, and we're going to show some of that. But let's show me what we've got going here on the front end of the Mini. It's starting to